Hey y'all, what's going on? It's your girl, Mrs. D Green here again. It is Sunday night, March. Wait, is it the 29th? No, it's the 30th. It's the 30th. This month is just running so fast for me. Tomorrow's the 31st, so yeah. I'm excited. Oh, I can't wait. Next week I'm going to New York with my daughter. New York is one of my favorite places to go to for visiting. I know some people would say, oh, it's a weird, spot to be interested in for a vacation, because that's what it's gonna be, a vacation. But I just love it because of what it offers that other cities don't. Like, and I've lived in Los Angeles, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in San Diego, I live now in Atlanta. They're all metropolitan cities, but each one of those cities has a component of New York. Maybe Chicago comes close, but not even. New York is its own epicenter of wonder. I'm sure you New Yorkers could relate, or anyone that's gone to New York and experienced the excitement. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Y'all, we are here to talk about episode 7 in season 3 of The White Lotus. And when I tell you, now I said last week was a good episode. No, scratch that. This week was, to me, a better episode because, some things just got uncovered, and there was, a situation that was more anticlimactic than we expected, but then it kind of took a turn because, people started regressing. So we will get into that. But before we do, please like, comment, subscribe, and share, okay? Not necessarily in that order. Trying to get out here in this algorithm. I mean, you know what it is. You know what it is. All right, let me take a sip of my melatonin because it's one of those recaps, okay? And normally I have about 2 pages of notes. Y'all, I got 3 pages of notes tonight. But I'm going to try, even though I have all the details, I'm going to try to be a little bit more concise than I've been before because it's fresh. Everything is fresh on my mind. I literally just got through watching the episode. It is 10:58 in the evening on this Sunday. That's how excited I was to do this recap. I said, oh no, I got to do this tonight before I forget anything. I don't want to miss anything. So with that being said, let's get into it, all right? So, the title of this episode, episode 7, season 3, is called Killer Instinct. Now, starts out with this like slow introduction at the fights. So, I'm thinking I'm about to see the fights. Well, no. Then it intercuts to them being back at Sritala and Jim's house. So it literally picks up where we left off last week, where Jim was walking down the stairs, Rick was staring at him, and then Frank and Sritala were talking. So, Sritala and Jim, they have this awkward back and forth with, well, it's Rick's not really talking. They have an awkward back and forth with Frank. So they're asking all these questions as to what kind of movie is he filming, what movies of Sritala's has he watched. Frank is just stumbling over all the answers, and I'm thinking, damn, y'all didn't prepare shit. I mean, this is kind of a big operation. You didn't think to prepare him or prime him or give him a list of her movies so that he could at least answer the questions. But with Sritala, with all due respect, being kind of thirsty and eager to get back out there, and Jim, he's so frail. Like, Scott Glenn is who plays Jim. If you know who Scott Glenn is, I forgot what his character's name was in Training Day, but he was the guy that was, I think he was in the wheelchair, and he was the drug dealer that had saved all that stash money, and he had it stashed under his house, and Denzel, got him for his money. That's Scott Glenn. So that was filmed in 2020, oh, it was 2001. It aired in 2002, and he was a little older then. So just imagine Scott Glenn now. He's very old and frail. So yeah, between them, they're both of their conditions, like, it's kind of going in one ear and out the other. I think they're missing, if not, they're not picking up on any shadiness that could be coming from Rick and Frank because of that frailness, and then Sritala's eagerness to get back out into the limelight through this movie, which she then asks what kind of movies Frank directs, and he's like, he's shooting off all these random titles like the Enforcer, the Executor. He says he does action movies, so he thinks of any action word that comes to mind, and he gives that as a title. And I was just like, man, y'all should have better prepared for this. You're gonna blow each other's cover. So now, because Frank is getting nervous when Sritala asks them what they're going to drink, Frank at first asks for herbal tea because we know that Frank is sober, right? And Rick asks for a whiskey. But, you know, I guess that line of questioning just got to Frank, and then he succumbs to his vices and he asks for a whiskey. And let me just tell you, Frank was not lying when he described how hard in the paint he goes. Because I'll let you know later, but I was just like, oh my God, this dude is spiraling. But it kicks off at this meeting. And I think Rick didn't really show any regret. It's kind of sad because it's like, dang, you got your friend involved in this and you didn't think of how this would impact him, be on his sobriety. But anywho, you know me and my tangents. I just start randomly thinking about that. All right, and then there's a lot of intercut scenes, so I'll go back and forth. This scene from their house intercuts to the monastery. So the monk is describing violence, and he says that everyone has the capacity to fall victim to violence, but what refrains you is you have to more or less think in depth about the complications that arise from violence, because it's not just the perpetrator that is it's not just the victim of violence that is going to be, you know, that suffers from it. The perpetrator suffers as well, because if you have, you know, a spiritual connection, you begin to feel a sense of guilt, right? So to remove yourself from that guilt and just maintain that self-control, refrain from it as much as you can. However, he does speak on how violence can come from many negative forms, many negative repressed emotions. So if that's not in check as well, that's why it's good to have that sense of being and that sense of self and that sense of reckoning. It's almost relative to some Christian principles as well, but just knowing yourself and knowing how to self-regulate and keep everything at a balance, it can, you know, prevent you from acting out violently. But he more or less explains that everyone is susceptible to acting out some sort of violence. I mean, I do it. I may not do it in a physical form, but if my daughter makes me upset, I violently yell. So, I mean, I was thinking about that as he was describing it. I was like, yeah, it really takes a lot of self-control and regulation to not allow yourself to fall victim to violence. And then it goes now to a scene with the Ratliffs. So they're getting ready to go to the dinner party. And Victoria, she's not really excited about going to this party. So she's like, oh, not these boat people, because Saxon reminds them that the party is Gary and Chloe. And then he tells them they don't have to go. But she's like, oh, I got all dolled up, so I may as well go. And then Saxon takes note. He's looking at Tim as if, you know, he sees that there's something wrong with Tim, because Tim's very loopy. Yeah, I didn't think about, not only is Tim over-medicating on lorazepam, which, by the way, he has no tolerance for. He's been building up the tolerance for it, or, you know, getting used to it while he's in Thailand. He's been mixing it with drinks, too. So you could just imagine the frame of mind Tim is in, considering he's in this fog and stupor of lorazepam and alcohol. And then he's got, you know, the weight of the world on his shoulders, you know, with everything that's happening back home. So Tim is just a mess. And all of a sudden now Saxon is starting to pay attention to that, which kind of marks, you know, given what Saxon just went through last week, it marks a spiritual awakening in Saxon in a way, because Saxon's kind of almost been a shell of himself. He hasn't really been operating. It's funny. Lachlan is the people pleaser, as the posture therapist pointed out, but Saxon is living in the shadow of his father. He doesn't have his own identity. So, you know, he's kind of been washed over with nothingness. You know, he's not really attached to anything other than his dad's name. So I just noticed that he was a little bit more awakened in this episode. All right, so now we go to Zion and Belinda. Belinda is scared to go to the dinner. Zion says, what's the worst that could happen? Why don't we go? You know, he's trying to assure her. And then he mentions, oh, I'm hungry, by the way, too. So let's go to this dinner. So he convinces her to go and tells her that he'll be there to protect her. So, well, you don't know who you protected her against, son, but kudos to you for trying to protect mom. All right, so then we get to our girls, the three friends. So they go to dinner because they stay back at the resort, right? Remember, they didn't go to the dinner party. And they all look good. I was like, oh, look at them. Even Lori, she got dolled up. I was like, okay, you know, she had her hair combed. She didn't look as disheveled and hardened as she's looked before. She had on a nice little dress. Sorry, y'all. Y'all know my nose ring is, you know, ADD Express. Choo-choo. But anywho, they looked good. They look good. There's awkward silence between them. Fabian walks them over to their table, asks them if they would like, you know, glasses of wine. And then he suggests, well, maybe I should bring a bottle because Jacqueline and Lori both say that they want a glass of rosé. So he offers a bottle and tells them that he's going to be performing. And then he asks Jacqueline for any tips because she's the entertainer. And she just flippantly says, just go for it. You'll do well. Which, again, lends itself to what I said last week. She's the type of girl that just goes after what she wants. She doesn't settle. So even though it was flippant, that's like the most confident way to approach it. If you are, you know, going to perform or be in front of a crowd or whatever, just go for it. You know, what's the worst that could happen? You made it already to that point. May as well rock it out. The fear will make you stumble. I will contest to that. So then we go back to Sritala and Jim's house. So now she's continuing to ask Frank these questions. And then throughout the exchange, he all of a sudden says that his name is Steve. So now he's changed his name. I think somewhere in that exchange he thought, well, shit, maybe I should change my name in case something leads back to us and then they don't have my real name. So then, of course, it's getting awkward. And Rick proposes that they split it up. So he tells Jim, he's like, I'd like to talk to you about doing business in Thailand. And then Jim is like, all right, I'll meet with you. Let's go talk about this in the den. So then they go into the den and then they have a conversation. Now it goes back to the dinner. So Tim walks in. Well, they all walk in, but as soon as Tim walks in, he asks, where's the bar? Because remember, he's medicating. And then the other people from the boat were at the party. So I was glad to see that it was more than just, you know, the few groups that we know, that there were extra people there, because I wouldn't think that Gary would want to poison all of those people. Because remember, I thought, oh, he's going to serve them maybe that poisonous fruit at the dinner and just take out all his enemies at once. But no, there were more people there. So thank God for that. So Saxon, he goes to Chelsea. He's very drawn to Chelsea, but I get it. You know, I get it. Chelsea's pretty hot. I'll give her that. I think she's cute. She's, I think her name is Amy Lou something, the British actress. But her teeth, she's got very pronounced teeth. But they're beautiful on her. And then she's got those big baby doll eyes. Like, she's a gorgeous girl. So I was like, okay, I see why. And then she's just got the best personality that just puts Saxon to task. And I think Saxon kind of likes that, you know, because she holds him accountable. All right, so they're observing, you know, the group. And, you know, it's older men with their younger women. And he's like, I wonder if any of these women would be into these men if they didn't have money. And then she points out to him, well, shoot, that's going to be you in 30 years. Isn't that what you want? And then he points to her and says, well, what you're doing is no different than what they're doing. Your man is older, right? And with money. And then she says to him that she is not drawn to Rick because of his money. She's drawn to him because of his soul. She says what attracted her to him is he told her his whole life story when they first met. and she looks at them as if they're like a yin and yang. Now, yin and yang is the opposite. You know, it could be dark, light, feminine, masculine, etc. So in the case of Rick and Chelsea, she says that she is hope and Rick is pain, and they intertwine with each other, and she's okay with that because, you know, she wants to see who's going to come out on top. So they do this dance. You know, she wants to bring him joy to get rid of his pain, and then I guess he brings her pain to keep her balanced so that she's not so overjoyed. It was kind of, you know, deep what she was saying, but I was thinking like, man, that's really strong for you to want to be subjected to someone else's pain, because I'm not of that ministry. I am not of the you can't save anyone that's not trying to save themselves. I guess that is selfless love, but I'm a mother, so I don't have that time to be given to someone unless it was my daughter's father who is deceased. So I don't have that kind of time to give to anybody in a relationship. So when she was saying that, I was like, that's a miserable way of one to, you know, be in love. It's kind of like struggle love, and I ain't with that. I ain't with that, but it was beautiful the way she described it, because I think Saxon was more drawn to her because of that, because it's almost like he's like, well, shoot, I have a lot of pain in me, or I'm void of something. Maybe, you know, you can be light to my darkness. Again, tangent. You guys know how I do. All right, so we're still at the party. We go to Tim getting sloshed. He's drinking, and he's sitting next to Gary. And Gary's kind of staring at him like, well, what the hell is going on with you? Which, whenever you see Gary, a.k.a. Greg, for me, whenever I see him, he just makes me uneasy because of what he did to Tanya. And just the way he conspired to take care of all of that is just, it's disturbing. You know, because you know what he's capable of. So you're not looking at him through the lens of oh, you're just this creepy, you know, aloof guy with money, like this mysterious guy. No, you are disturbed. You're a disturbed individual. So then Saxon is watching his dad, you know, kind of falling apart, no less. And he pulls him away from Gary. So then when he's pulling away from Gary, Gary notices that Belinda and Zion now walks into the party. And then we get to another fight undercut. Now, there, like I said, there's going to be little scenes here and there where they show the fight. So they're working you up to actually see the entire fight. But they're giving you little snippets of it throughout the episode, tying it into other scenes. So now we go back to the Sritala and Jim's house. So we have Rick and Jim. This is when it starts to kind of pick up and become a little ominous. So Rick asks Jim if, you know, he likes being in Thailand. And he's like, yes, Thailand is a beautiful country. It's been good to me. Rick asks him, have you been good to Thailand? And remember, he's trying to get information from him as to how to start a business or be a business person in Thailand. So, you know, Jim's telling him he's been there since 1965, and when he was up and coming, you know, there wasn't as much red tape, so he was able to get away with a little bit more. Not realizing Rick is taking this into consideration, because it's like, well, shoot, my dad was a part of that mess. So they talk about like how you have a lot more to lose when you get older, so you have to kind of like subdue yourself. But, you know, Jim looks back to the time when he was younger and able to just, you know, do whatever the hell he wanted out of the thrill of the hunt and that ambition. He wishes he can go back to that time because I guess he felt more alive, whereas now he's, you know, older and settled. And then Rick tells him that he thinks he's heard that the secret to life is knowing when to stop. And so that Jim's like, you lost me there. Then we go to the monastery. So now we have Piper and Lachlan. They're eating a modest meal, and they both don't seem to be into it. And it didn't look appealing to me because I eat with my eyes. I don't know about you, but I eat with my eyes. So I don't care if it's a top tier meal. If the presentation is crappy, I'm not going to be into it. So the placement, like, the food's got to be looking a certain way. It can't look bland. The color's got to be right. The texture of, if it's a vegetable, it can't be overcooked. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't you guys look at your food like that? Like, if it does not look good to me first, I'm not going to be interested in it. All right, so now we go to Guy Talk and Mook. Now, I'll be honest. I've kind of treated their scenes together, kind of like I can do with or without them. But this scene in particular, I actually, I paid attention to it. So they're on their date, and he tells Mook that he's not going to get a promotion. And he says it's because Lek thinks he's soft. Now, Lek is the head security guard, remember? And then she says that he can prove himself to Lek, so that way he doesn't think that of him. And Guy Talk then starts to go into his beliefs, and it's not so much that he's soft, but remember how the monk was speaking about violence? Well, then it ties into this conversation. Guy Talk refrains from violence because that's how that's part of his practice. He doesn't want to put harm on anyone else. Mook tells him, though, in this world that you live in, that we all live in, because I understood her when she said this, you have to defend yourself. So while violence is not the preference, when you have to defend yourself, that's an exception. And I agree with that. Like I tell my daughter, sorry, you guys may judge me as a parent, but I tell my daughter, because she's an only child, and I'm just trying to teach her to defend herself when she has to. So she's told me, she's like, well, Mom, if I ever got into a fight, would you get mad at me? And I said, well, if you were defending yourself and they hit you first, all bets are off. But don't go out there starting any fights. So yeah, so I understood Mook when she was telling Guy Talk that. It's like sometimes you have to rise to the occasion. And there are certain roles that come with that. So I would imagine being a guard, even though your role is kind of passive in a sense that, you're guarding a gate, you're just checking people. You may have to get down and dirty sometimes because you are in the security world. And what do people who work in security do? Well, they secure the premises. They provide protection. And sometimes, you might be pushed to your limit. So I got her. And then she tells him because of what he said to her, she thought he was more ambitious and would actually see it the way that she sees it. And she seems to be a little disappointed in him, more or less saying that he couldn't see himself getting violent. So, all right, we get to Fabian's performance. They're back at dinner. And Lori all of a sudden says, hey, we should go to the Muay Thai fights. And then Jacqueline says she doesn't want to go because she's tired. Lori sarcastically quips. Sorry, I got gum in my mouth. Just to keep my mouth from getting dry, but let me take it out. Hold on. Quick. All right, so as I was saying, Lori sarcastically quips, and Jacqueline calls her out like, well, what is that supposed to mean? And she's like basically telling her that you really shouldn't have a problem with what I did because it's not like you're in love with him, right? Lori's like, well, this is your pattern though. And then she brings up at her wedding how Jacqueline was all over some dude named Dave. Oh, wait, Dave is Kate's husband. It just came to me. Yes, Dave is Kate's husband. Wow, what a skank. Jacqueline. So then, okay, so as she's saying that, Kate's in the middle like, wait, what? But they're going back and forth. They don't even have time to address that. So Jacqueline says that she needs to not be so mad. And if she's mad about something, she needs to fix her life. And she tells Lori that your choices are your own. You're a victim of your own choices. So if you're choosing less for yourself, then don't be upset, when you get the short end of the stick, because that's what you opted for. I was like, damn, she right. And then Kate backs her up. She says something to this effect of, Lori, your source of disappointment seems to change, but the constant is that you're always disappointed. And I was like, wow. It's kind of like what I was saying last week. Lori, she's She kind of takes the scraps and falls into the shadows of other people. And don't be mad at Jacqueline, because Jacqueline just goes after stuff. Now, granted, I mean, she could have a little bit more boundaries, because if you're all over your man's husband, I'm not sure if Dave and Kate were married at the time, but they obviously were dating, right? Girl, like, okay, have some restraint. You ain't got to be after everybody. But I mean, I get her strength and, the pursuit of happiness. So, she doesn't sit around and wait for life to happen to her. She makes it happen for herself. I can relate to Jacqueline in that aspect, because I'm the same way. So then Lori is over this. She's like, I'm leaving. She says, well, you know what? If that's who I am, then let me tell you about you guys, more or less. She says Kate is fake and Jacqueline is vain and whatever she said. And then she mic dropped and walked away, and they're just both looking stunned. So, I mean, Lori, at least is outspoken to a degree, when backed into a corner. All right, so now we go back to the dinner scene. Now, this dinner scene was kind of meaty. There was a lot going on. So Victoria is talking to a young girl that is dating one of the older men, and she asks him if he's in love, she asks her, sorry, if she is in love with this gentleman because he has money. And then she says, well, how much money does he have? And then the girl is appalled. Naturally, she's like, you can't ask me anything like that. So then Victoria goes into this whole, you should come to North Carolina. I've got some nice gentlemen for you. You don't have to do this, as if the girl is a prisoner. And the girl's like, I love Rupert. I guess that's her boyfriend's name. And Victoria's just like, not sold. She's like, girl, just get out of this. You don't have to do this. So then we get to a scene with Greg and Belinda. So Belinda's getting some food. Greg asks her if they can go talk. And of course she's resistant because she's scared. Then it cuts to a scene with Saxon and Tim. And then Saxon just flat out asked him, like, what is going on? Like, is everything okay? So this is him now picking up, not being so douchey and self-focused. He's starting to really see, all right, and this is what I meant by him becoming a little bit more enlightened. He's starting to pick up on, all right, there's something going on, and he's going against the status quo. So where he would normally just take what his dad says, his sixth sense is kicking in. So he tells him, he's like, look, Dad, I don't have anything, and my reputation is more or less tied to you. So if something is going on, you need to tell me what's going on. I thought that was pretty bold of Saxon, because I could imagine if your dad has just been this like center of the universe for everyone, right? This big guy in your life, for you to have to like take him to task, that probably took a lot for Saxon, but Tim denies it and tells him he has nothing to worry about. And then as Saxon, walks away, he looks at him, he looks really sad and just like so distressed. And I was just like, oh, Tim. So now we get to Greg and Belinda, because she did agree to go meet with them. He says that Tanya spoke about her, so he knows that Tanya did propose to start a business with her, but she always felt bad that she never fell through with that. So then he starts to say to her, Tanya would have wanted me to live in peace, and I know she probably would have wanted you to have your business. So then he bribes her, or it's a veiled bribe, but tying her story with Tanya, the fact that she wanted a business, the fact that he didn't want to deal with a lot of the legal stuff. He said he just couldn't handle that, so that's why he chose to stay in Thailand. So he's trying to convince her that he's just doing this selfless thing of oh, I lost my wife and I just want peace, and I didn't want to have that headache, but let me honor her, and I'm sure she would want you to honor her by giving me peace. And Belinda's like, I need to think about it. Because morally speaking, while that is a very enticing offer, and he offers her like $100,000, which really ain't shit to start a business, I guess, but morally speaking, she knows that she would be an accomplice to a murder, because Belinda knows, and he knows that she knows. So, she's got to sit on that for a little bit. But I was like, All right, so she runs to Zion after, you know, their little exchanges, she tells Zion, we need to get the hell out of here. And then Zion's trying to protest, and then she puts her foot down like, we need to get the fuck out of here, Zion. And then they leave. And then Greg is watching them as they walk out. And I forgot to mention this small detail. When Belinda basically says she had to think about it, there was like this sinister grimace on Gary's face. Like when I tell you Gary is diabolical, aka Greg, he is diabolical. He's scary. So, you know, same face when he was watching them walk away. And I'm like, oh gosh. All right, so we have a little fight intercut. Takes us to another scene. Now we're back with Rick and Jim. So Rick asked Jim if he and Sritala have any children. And Jim says, yeah, we have 2 daughters. One lives in New York, one is here. You know, we spoiled them rotten or whatever. And then Rick's like, well, they must have had a good childhood, because if you don't have a good childhood, you basically don't have anything, right? I kind of, you know, understood him when he said that, because, you know, given his state, Rick's had a pretty distressed life. But, you know, it just depends on the situation. And in Rick's case, yeah, his mom died at 10 and his dad was murdered. So who was going to be there to really love him? Like my daughter, she lost her father, but at least she has me to love her. I couldn't imagine, you know, if she didn't have me to kind of be there as a supplemental parent. I pray to God that I'm able to see this little girl's life through. But, all right, let me not get all emotional, because I was, you know, I see that grown man, but I see that inner child in Rick when he's telling Jim about his situation. So, he asks, Rick asked Jim, he's like, do you remember Gloria Hatchett? That was Rick's mother's name. And Jim, of course, you know, he's an older man. He's not going to remember. However, he gave a look as if he recognized that name, but I could be wrong. So he explains to Jim, you know, my mother, I've known about you since I was 10. My mother told me basically that you murdered my father and yada, yada, yada. And I've been waiting for this moment forever. Pulls out the gun. As I kind of expected, you know, he has that opportunity, but he doesn't take it because, you know, that buildup, while it felt one way when you're actually in the moment, and then he's looking at him like he's this frail old man, he kind of has a change of heart. Like he's, you know, it's not what he thought, but he does, like, you know, much like jump at him like this to scare him. And of course Jim is scared because he's frail, and then he tips his chair over and says motherfucker and knocks him over and then leaves. And then runs to Frank and Sritala. Frank, you know, is looking at his face like, okay, is it time to go? And he's like, yeah, we gotta go. So then they rush out to the boat. The guards are sitting there, and then he tells the guards, hey, the old man fell. You might want to go check on him. So then they're like, huh? Run over to go, you know, run into the house to go check. And then that's when they have their opportunity to hightail it out of there on the boat. And they get out of there. It was that little 30 seconds to a minute had you on edge, because it's like, oh my God, I hope those guards don't catch up to them. All right. So now we go to the fights, the actual fights. It's not an intercut. So we have Gaitak and Mook, and Mook is telling Gaitak that, you know, see, fighting is natural, just kind of like advising him to pay attention to what he sees. And then he looks over and you see Lori sitting next to Valentin, right? And then now I know their names. There's a reason I know their names now, because I was like, oh my God. So Vlad and Alexei, they walk in and join them at the fights. Gaitak has a flashback. Guess who was the person that jumped out of the car after the robbery when they were trying to get through the gate? It was Vlad. Vlad is the bald, fair-skinned, taller one that was downloading Kate on his experience, you know, with his mother. Alexei is the one that actually committed the robbery. So he's the one that, you know, had the snake running down his body or whatever. He's the darker skin. He's the darker one out of the, because remember how I said Valentin and him are the darker ones? He's the short one with the snake tattoo. And I was just like, wow, I knew it. Because like I said before, they didn't show the face, but I was trying to look at the profile and I was trying to see, I was like, well, does one of the, it could have been one of the guys. And yes, his dumbass had a mask over his face, but he didn't have on like a hoodie or anything. So Guy Talk remembered him. And I was like, oh shit. So we know who committed the robbery, and we know who's been responsible for the crimes in White Lotus, as I suspected. So then now we go to Piper and Lachlan. Piper asks him if he's okay. And she asks him how he likes being at the monastery. And Lachlan, you know, being a people pleaser, seems to be giving, in my opinion, Piper a rehearsed answer. He's like, yeah, I really like it. You know, telling her what he thinks she wants to hear, like giving her confirmation. And Piper knows her brother. That was not the answer she was expecting. She was just going in to check in on him. Because then he tells her, I think I want to stay here with you. I think I want to do this too. It's such and such. And again, like, it seems rehearsed because even I wasn't buying it. It didn't seem like it was real. It just seems like because Lachlan has now disappointed Saxon and that relationship is fractured, he's now telling, you know, Piper he wants to stay there. And he even says this, I don't want to go back home ever. And that's because he's running from the pain. The pain of that memory between him and Saxon. The pain of he thought he was pleasing Saxon, but he turns out to have not been doing that. So, you know, when you're a people pleaser and you think you're doing things to make other people happy, when you see that they're not happy, well, then there you go. What are you left with? You know, and it goes back to what that monk said. It's like he's present on everyone else's plane of reality, but not his own reality. And Piper sends that because when he said that, she awkwardly walked out of the room like, all right, I was just checking on you. Gotta go. Bye. Because I don't even think she bought that from him. She knows her brother. All right. So now we go back to the dinner. And we have we have Saxon talking to Chelsea. You know, he's into her. And she says that she's going to go. And he's like, oh, I can walk you out. Chloe comes over. She's like, oh, how's everything going? And then they both say they're going to go. And she's like, oh, no, Saxon, you stay here. I talked to Gary, and this girl is so dumb. Let me just preface this with that. She's such a dingbat. Well, in this context, she is, because she only sees Greg as a prize. But so she says that Greg told her, you know, he has some fantasies, some repressed fantasies, and he basically, him and Tanya never had sex, right? He opened up to her about his former wife. Well, if you've been watching like I have, you know that's not true because they were having sex on their honeymoon in season 2. So then he says that she was insecure. Well, Chloe says that he said that she was insecure, and she bought this. She was insecure about his fetishes, and he didn't feel comfortable, you know. Well, he thought she would be insecure, so he didn't disclose it to her. So he's just basically been repressed. His parents, what this fetish is his parents used to have sex really loud, and his dad would leave the the door open, and he would actually see them having sex. And he basically developed this whole voyeurism fetish. That's the way he presented it to her. And so he said to her that he would like for Saxon to basically stay at the party and have sex with Chloe, and he can watch. I was like, how could she possibly think that Saxon is going to be down for this? Because it only benefits you. Saxon is not down for no other dude watching him have sex. I mean, and then she brought up, she said, because he's like, I'm not that kind of guy. And she's like, well, what about last night? Girl, he was high. He wasn't in his right mind. But you know, Chloe is so one-dimensional. She doesn't care about any of that. And Chelsea is just amused listening to this. She's like, oh, he wants to it's almost like he wants to make his mom happy, like when he was a little boy. So you're like his mom. I'm just like, what? I was with Saxon in this scene. Because Chloe asks him if he's going to stay. And he's like, no, the fuck? Like, I'm not doing that. And then when Chelsea leaves, he leaves. Well, actually, he walks out first. And then Chelsea leaves behind him. All right. So I was like, I know that's right, Saxon. You know, it's funny because you find yourself sometimes randomly rooting for the White Lotus characters. Because Mike White does a really phenomenal job of highlighting the intricacies of the human condition and how we all have, a tendency to have a dark side to us and a light side to us. So depending on the episode and whatever's going on in their unique situation, because it's scene by scene and situation by situation, where you want have one character where you like one episode, you may understand them and like them a little better in other episodes. So that's what makes this such a great show, because no one is always 100% right and they're not 100% wrong. So except for Gary. Gary's wrong all the fucking time. AKA Greg. All right, so then we go to Rick and Frank, and they're in Bangkok, and Rick just explains to Frank how the build-up, it wasn't nothing. He thought he was going to feel one way, and then when he got the opportunity, it changed his mind. Frank's ready to celebrate and hit the town, and they do that. Then we go to Belinda and Zion. Belinda tells Zion she doesn't want to take the money, and because she doesn't want to be an accomplice. And Zion's telling her, like, look, Mom, take the money. You could take a year off. She's not going for it. She doesn't want to go for it. So now we have Kate and Jacqueline in their room. Kate tells Jacqueline she feels bad, and Jacqueline's kind of like, okay. She's being real about it. And this goes into what they said about Kate. Kate's trying to play both sides. Like, you sometimes you can't be Switzerland all the time. You got to figure out what side you're going to be on. Because it's like, she tells Jacqueline, she's like, well, I was backing you at the table. Okay, yeah, in this conversation with Jacqueline, you're trying to make her feel bad for her choice. Like, just come out with it. So she passive aggressively says, well, I just feel bad and I guess you don't. And then Jacqueline's like, girl, like, she's tired of Kate at this point. She's like, I'll just be the bad guy in this one, like I always am. Like, she's not here for it. And I'm with you, girl. Like, you were grown ass women. Like, stop it. Let's stop playing this game. Then we go to a scene with Saxon and Chelsea. Saxon tells Chelsea that, he could be what she wants. He could even be spiritual if she wanted. So she's trying to teach him how to meditate. And, she's walking him through it. And then as they're sitting, cross-legged, and she's going over everything, he touches her hand. And I think she is a little bit attracted to Saxon. So, because as soon as he touched her hand, she was like, oh no, I guess you got it. And then she throws him some books and, tells him just read those books. And, they're not going to sit here and go through a whole ritual, but he gets the point. And she shoos him out of the room, like a good girlfriend, because she loves Rick. And then with that being said, she's like, I have to call him, by the way. She calls Rick, and Rick doesn't answer his phone. Cut to a scene of Rick and Frank partying in Bangkok. When I tell you they were partying, and Rick didn't seem into it. They were in the club, drinking it up. They go to the hotel. They have those girls with them, because there was a scene where they were on an elevator going, upstairs with some girls. Frank is a party dude. He had this big ass wine glass, pours wine into it as they're walking to the room, doing coke. I think he even smoked some crack. Like, he was doing the most. And Rick was just sitting there like he wasn't enjoying it. But Frank was just letting loose. So that monologue, he did to a T. To a T. And I think, no, they were all women, but who knows? The lady boys in Thailand look good. So I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lady boy in that mix. But we'll see next episode what happens from that. All right, so then we get to a scene with Victoria and Tim. They're in bed, and then, Tim asks her what she's doing. And she says that she's praying for Piper to be miserable at the monastery. She's going to call on Jesus to help her with that. Tim pops another lorazepam, just to pass through the night. Now, Lori and Alexei. So, they're having sex. And then after they have sex, Alexei's pathetic ass starts trying to wear on Lori's emotions. He starts to prey on her. So I guess he must have picked up she has some sort of desperation or need to be seen. And I guess he feels like, since he let her hit it, or he gave her some pipe, that, oh, she should be groveling at his feet. And so he tells her the story about how he's overstayed his welcome in Bangkok because he would love to go to New York because, that's where Lori's from. And she's like, well, if you're ever in town, I can show you around. And so he's like, well, if I left, I wouldn't be able to come back. Then he tells her about his mother being sick back home in Russia, and he needs about 10,000 US dollars to help her. And he's like, I know you're rich. And she's like, I don't have that kind of money. He's like pressing her for the money. And he's like, you can wire it, Cash App, Zelle. It was just so tense. For a minute, I thought he was going to try to like rob her. And then his girlfriend knocks on the door because she knows that he's in there with someone. She's banging on the door. He gets up, and this gives Lori an opportunity to get out of the room. So as she's climbing out of the room, out of the window, the girlfriend gets in, but there was a cut. So when Lori was getting her stuff together, she ran into a part of the room, and on the dresser, there was like a dresser in the room. You saw the jewels from the robbery. So it was Alexei. That was the one that conducted the robbery. Man. All right, so Lori she's able to get out. As she's getting out of the window, the girlfriend gets in the room, and she sees Lori, climbing out of the window, and like smacks her up. And then Lori jumps down, hails a cab. Boom, she's going back to the room. Then we have Piper. So we go to a scene with Piper in bed at the monastery. She's kind of staring around, and she notices that there's spider webs, on the ceiling in the corners. I'm getting the feeling that it's not as relaxing and appealing as she thought, because she's kind of taking a look around, and from what I gathered, maybe having second thoughts. So maybe Victoria's prayer is working. Then now we get to the last scene. The last scene is Tim thinking about what Saxon said, how Saxon says that that's all he has. If he's not successful, he couldn't live without basically what he's doing, because he's living in the shadows of his dad. His career is based off of his dad. And so he's recalling that. And then he recalls when Victoria says that she couldn't live without all of their, their creature comforts. So he's having remember, lorazepam and alcohol. So his mind is fried and all over the place. Well, he imagines that he commits a homicide, double homicide, and a suicide. So he kills Saxon, kills Victoria, and then shoots himself. Well, it's a dream. But when he comes out of that little dream or whatever, he looks to the cupboard where the gun was, the one that he stole from Guy Talk, right? And he's going through all of the drawers, and then he realizes that the gun is missing. So then, he's trying to think back to, well, wait, where could it be? Where could he be? And the camera pans out of the room, and it's looking at the outside of the room, and it's just leaving you with Tim and his thoughts on that gun. And that was the episode. So what did you think? I liked it. Like I said, I wanted to get this recap out tonight because I was just so excited. Like, there was a lot of movement. And now that we know, that those three fuckers were responsible for the crime, I'm intrigued as to how Guy Talk is going to handle that. And then it also got me to thinking too about the violence, the violence description. The monk said that how everyone is susceptible to it. So when you think about it, any of those characters could be responsible for the shooting that we heard at the beginning of the episode. So let me give you an example. I could see Belinda, maybe fighting for her life, shooting off. Maybe, Gary has some people come to the resort because Gary has the means to hire killers. That's what he did in the second season. He had hired some people to kill Tanya. She ended up killing them. So maybe Belinda will have that. Or maybe Guy Talk does develop a killer instinct because now that he knows who the robbers were, maybe he's going to start shooting all of them. Or maybe Tim, snaps, and his family, maybe he shoots and then misses, and then they start running and he starts walking through the resort shooting everybody. Or maybe it's Rick and Chelsea on some Bonnie and Clyde stuff. You know, maybe the guards got wind of what Rick did at the house and now they're on the hunt and, you know, they got to protect themselves. It could be anybody. It could be anybody at this point. So we'll see what they show us next week, right? All right, well, let me know what you think. Put your comments down, like, subscribe, share. Please, please, please comment. I will engage. I do appreciate those of you that have been subscribing and commenting. It really gets me going out on this algorithm in YouTube. On that note, I'm going to go to bed because as you can hear, I'm starting to get a little sleepy. But again, like I said, I appreciate you all for showing me the support. All right, peace and blessings, y'all. It's your girl, Mrs. D. Green. Bye.